Hey everyone, today we're going to talk about Model Context Protocol and one of its applications. So, Model Context Protocol or MCP is one of these new technologies that came out that allows your LLMs to have additional context as well as capabilities and functionalities that have not been realized so far. So, how this works is it provides capabilities to your MCP client. It's basically a client-server architecture where the client would be your LLM interface. It could be something like Claude Desktop or your IDE, which is Visual Studio Code, and then you chat with it. But this client-server integration, once it's set up, would give that interface more capabilities to take action on your behalf, have additional context, and also some actionable functionalities. So this is the official documentation of Model Context Protocol, and then they also have a GitHub account and repositories that have information about the different tech stacks to implement this, SDKs, as well as the servers that are coming up in this space very quickly. So the service repository has information about some of the MCP servers that are developed by the community and some of the reference implementation. Today we're going to use the PostgreSQL MCP server, which allows you to talk to a PostgreSQL database. So for the data, I'm using Mimic data, which is healthcare data, which contains medical records and diagnosis information and some of the demographic information of patients. They have a bunch of tables and files that we can use. I've loaded them into my local Postgres installation. Let me bring that up so that we can have a quick look at how the data will look like, medical notes, and so on. So once we have this information loaded into our database, all we need to do is have MCP in this Claude Desktop, and that if you go to settings, you can have this MCP server integration setup here. It is as simple as having this configuration in the JSON file. This is what I borrowed from the GitHub repo that I was showing earlier on how to use this PostgreSDB MCP server. The way you use it, here is a reference example for that. You can either use a Docker image or a node package. In this case, I'm using a node package, which will be executed runtime and then will be used by the MCP client. So it has the endpoint and the authentication details of my PostgreSDB server database. And then once that is set up, if you go back to Claude, you can see that that is running and it's set up correctly. And to actually use it and realize what its use is, I'll just start a new conversation here and ask questions like, I have a predefined question that I'm going to quickly use for the sake of time. So basically I'm asking it, based on the Mimic data, what are the most common medical conditions? Once I ask this question, as you can see here, there's an integration that is available to MCP tools, which basically is identifying that it needs to query a database to fetch this answer and is asking me whether or not I'll be allowing this action. So I will go ahead and allow it, and then it is basically running a SQL query. And the good part about it is it starts off with a baseline query and iterates on top of it, identifies the columns and rows that exist within the table, and corrects itself till it actually finds the right query to use in this case. And then finally it comes up with an answer. So it is using a complex chain of thought approach here, doing trial and error to begin with and finding the actual accurate query that it needs to use and finally coming up with an answer, which is very cool. And then it also uses its inherent capabilities of an LLM to frame the answer, give some analysis around it. So as a follow-up question, I'll ask what are the common prescriptions for these conditions. So it again goes back to our database, runs these SQL queries, and it gets better with time because it now has additional context as to how the underlying database looks like and what fields to use. And then it actually goes ahead and runs the series of queries, saves the data internally, and gets us the right answer. This was just one simple application with how we can integrate our MCP clients like Cloud Desktop to our MCP servers, which are again interacting with some of these resources that we have. It could be databases, it could be third-party applications that you want to take some action upon. And you can also develop your own MCP servers using one of the provided allowed SDKs, and then you can host the server either locally or remotely, and then ask your client to interact with them after integrating them. So after running all the series of queries, this was able to identify what are the prescriptions that are prescribed for each of these conditions.